Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Srini Ambati. I'm lead cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I'm proctoring for this session today. Uh, so again, you are having a lot of interesting sessions, but uh, you know every session can go on forever. But we have almost 600 RSVPs. A lot of speakers, proctors, and staff making this happen. Uh, Again, you can find the slides in the link that I'm showing you right now. I'll also post these links in the chat window in a minute. You can also view the recordings in YouTube channel, and there are a few upcoming events. Take a note of that and see if you can attend. And without any delay, I want to introduce Andy. Andy is, MVP, and he's a chief data engineer and data philosopher. Uh, and one thing that I want to highlight is he's a farmer too. Andy, I cannot admire farmers enough in my life, but thank you for being both technologist and a farmer. With that, I'll hand it over to you. We are recording this session. It's all yours, Andy.
Thank you so much, sir, for that introduction. I'm more of a former farmer, although we do grow a few vegetables around, and we're in the middle of constructing a greenhouse right now. We want to get that up before the cold weather hits in Farmville, Virginia. But we'll see. It kind of comes and goes, with travel. But I appreciate the introduction. And I want to go ahead and share my screen here. Hope you can see it. Azure DevOps and the SSIS development lifecycle is what I want to talk about here, because some cool things have happened recently with this. And by the way, there's some notes here about me. I will highlight that my co-host is actually helping with the organization here of the Data Driven Podcast. That's Frank Lavinia. And you'll see that a little bit later. Every now and then I do these things on Twitch. If you go follow me at twitch.tv/Andy Leonard, whenever I do them, live streams, and I'm doing more and more of them, you'll get an email or a notification. So with that said, just want to walk through a brief history of this because we have a limited amount of time. Promise that's not a complaint. I've gotten these done before in less time than I wrote it for. But we're just going to walk through a brief history here. Continuous integration or continuous delivery. This has been around for a while, and sometimes folks call the CD continuous deployment. And then we're going to look at a little bit of source control. But like I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And in fact, my very first past summit presentation in 2007, I took 2 laptops with me and a router so that I could run Orcus Beta 2, which was Team Foundation servers, a virtual server with Team Foundation on it. And I believe it was TFS 2008, one of the betas. But anyway, I've had this dream of being able to do exactly what the Node and JavaScript people can do with their code when they write it and they check it into a source control engine. They can do a lot of these automated builds with it, right? So the code gets checked in, and as soon as it gets checked in, it's compiled, it's deployed somewhere, or maybe not, serverless stuff, and it's executed and tested so that we can see what exactly is the outcome of these tests. And what's nice is over time you build regression tests because you never think of everything. And then something will break and you'll go, oh, I should write a test for that. And you do, and that becomes part of the testing cycle for the next version. And on you go with this. But a lot of people think about this and think, but you're doing SQL Server integration services, Andy. What are you talking about? Well, 2 things. I was in MCSD back before .NET came out. Don't be too excited. It was Visual Basic and Visual Basic, I think 5 or 6 is what I certified on. And Visual InterDev. Anybody remember InterDev? But I went into data work, and then I kind of jumped the fence because of my developer background and into data integration work, DTS and SSIS. And here's what I've learned over the years, is that SSIS is software development. And because of that, we need to treat it like software development. So what does that mean? Well, we're going to do this quick walkthrough where we talk about applying source control, because that's one of the principles of software development. You want to always use source control. Then we're going to apply this to Azure DevOps. If you've not tried Azure DevOps, this is a quick little primer on it. If you go to dev.azure.com and you can start an account there, there's usually some kind of deal going on where it's free. I believe even today, you can have teams of up to 5 working on a project in Azure DevOps, and it doesn't cost you anything. But please verify that to be sure. I know it was like that in the past. You sign up at dev.azure.com, you create a project, and of course, you have to create an organization. I skipped right over that. But once you get your organization configured, you can create a new project. And if you're familiar with Team Foundation services, then you probably remember that they were called team projects back then. It's that same concept. Here you can see in this slide, speaking of Team Foundation server, I'm using Team Foundation version control down at the bottom. And I picked a Scrum work item process, although you're not going to see any work item process in here. Once my project was created, it's called SSIS samples, and it's supposed to be publicly available, although that short link has not been working for some reason. Probably something dumb that I did. Some of you may have just looked at this and went, why TFS? Everybody's using Git. And not quite. There's still a lot of enterprises that invested substantially in Team Foundation servers, and I really want those people to be aware that it's still available. There's a version available in Azure DevOps along with Git. So if you're there and you're thinking I can't go to the cloud because I'm using TFS, that's not entirely accurate. All right. So after you get your team set up, your team project. Called a project now in Azure DevOps. You want to configure Visual Studio to work with it, and you click Tools and Options, set your source control to, in my case, I set it to TFS here. And after that, I want to manage my connections here. I connect to a project, and I've got my SSIS samples project here that I was able to connect to in Team Explorer. And after that, you've got access then to that URL that's there, and you'll see if you create a project inside of Visual Studio moving forward, it'll create just like this, just like a standalone project. And this is you can do this in TFS and you can do it in Git. It's just a little easier to do it one way versus the other, depending on which engine you pick. In this case, using TFS, I can create the project first and then add it to source control. Git flows a little better if you create a repository, clone it, it's empty, clone that repository, and then create the project inside of it. So either way, and there's ways to do it the other way in a different engine. You're not totally hosed if you didn't do it exactly like I just said. In Solution Explorer, once I add, right-click the solution and click Add Solution to Source Control, then I can navigate to where I would like this. And you can see I'm adding a new name for the solution folder here. It doesn't exist in my screenshot. It's called Test SSIS Solution because I was feeling really creative when I named it. And once I do that add it to source control, you see these little decorations here, these little green pluses beside the artifacts that Azure DevOps is going to natively source control. And once I've put those in, I can just check in the code. I can right click and check in the code. It's a good idea to leave a comment message whenever you check in code, because I think future you will thank you. If you ever have to go back through and read some of these comments, usually something tragic has happened to prompt that. And I don't like to be negative and say what happens if you get hit by a truck. I want to be positive and say what happens if you win the lottery, because I love what I do. I mean, I know me. I'll do this and play around with this technology until I can't do it anymore. But at the same time, back that way about 2 miles is one of the best bass fishing lakes, largemouth bass fishing lakes in Southern Virginia. It's called Briary Creek Lake. And those fish need catching. I'm just saying. If I was to win the lottery, and I probably need to play if I'm going to win, then I'd fish more. I'll say it that way. Once it's checked in, you end up with these little lock icons here that let you know that the code is checked in. One other thing too about leaving good comments is this is a good way for you to be able to take a vacation and not get called. If you leave a lot of documentation around somebody covering for you, or if you move to a much better paying job, then somebody behind you can then work through that. So just a quick demo of what a repo looks like here. Let's pop over to my VM. And this VM is named vdemo. And let's go into the repos section here. I'll zoom in. This is Azure DevOps, and here's the repos coming up now. And so if I click on test SSIS solution, I see the SLN is in there. There's a project in there. I actually made it add the ISPack file just in case. That way you can go get that. But you can see I did this one check-in an hour ago. That's when I was testing. And let me tell you, it's awesome to be an MVP. The data I was renewed as a data platform MVP yesterday. But what happened is a lot of the accounts that I was using for stuff that I'm working with in this demo, they expired at the end of last term of being an MVP, and I had to go re-enter the credentials and stuff like that. So this morning when I came in to run through my demos, test everything, nothing worked. So that was like, awesome. I'm going to do Global Data Fest, but I've got recordings of everything working, so we were good. But we're gonna mess around with this, write a record and succeed. This is going to be the package that we're going to show these principles of using SSIS with Azure DevOps with that one package. Now, there's a couple of caveats here that I might as well cover now. One of them is that this is not the right way to do all of the things I'm going to show you. It's the way to start. It's the right way to start. But we're not going to hit artifacts in Azure DevOps. We're not going to do test plans. We're not going to do release, technically release pipelines out to the two environments that we're targeting. And you may look at that and rightfully say, Andy, that's not a fair demo, full demo of all of Azure DevOps. And you would be correct in saying that. But even when I've got all the time in the world, this is not trivial. The amount of information that I'm sharing with you is not. And if you've never done this before, and if I can get you to the point I'm going to get you to, then you can pick it up and you can do all of that extra stuff. You can do test plans and the use of artifacts and release pipelines. You can take it from there. I am going to achieve. I'm going to test. I'm going to deploy to two environments at the end, and of course our artifact that we're going to be mostly working with is this SSIS package here, but we're not doing it in a way that I would consider production ready. So just wanted to share with you those caveats. This is concepts. This is using these two things together that are really hard. So with that said, I do want to zoom out just for a minute so that I can show you the project. I'm going to open up the test SSIS solution file here locally, the one that's being source controlled there. In that spot, you'll see that Visual Studio is having a good day. And here's that Team Explorer that I was talking to you about. There's the pending changes, and these are excluded changes because I moved the project from where it was to where it is. Now, there is Solution Explorer. You could see all of those little locks that are hanging out with it. So enough of just kind of looking around, getting our sea legs here. We got a couple of more introductory type things to do. And then the next piece of this is to really talk about agents. These are Azure DevOps agents. And I got to tell you, I really like the way this works. I know there's lots of places where Azure uses agents, and some agents can live in the cloud, or some can be self-hosted, like the ones that I'm going to be using here, and I'm running on a VM, by the way. It's a fairly beefy VM, 4 logical processors and 32 gigs of RAM. Yeah, it's a beefy one. But the fact that I can run this little shell app, setting in in command shell, I can run that, and that it can communicate with something going on in the cloud back and forth. That just makes me all giggly inside. I don't know a better way to explain it. If you download the deck, and I haven't posted it yet, but I will, you'll get these links in there. This has been updated several times since it was posted in August, I believe. If not, there's some of the other links that I have in here. Just walk through this, and I found this amazing. That the way that this whole process works. The only thing that had not been updated last August when I took that screenshot was the location of personal access tokens. They're right here beside, you'll see an icon that you've got set up there for yourself, or maybe just your initials. Just next to that is like a little person and settings. You click that, and personal access tokens is beneath that. Now, it's moved even since I took this screenshot. And it brings up an interesting and I think good point. Don't let things changing throw you in Azure, because things change every day. I did a talk similar to this. Actually was on Azure Data Factory, which my friend and brother Joel Cochran is going to talk about right after me here. Stick around for that. That's going to be awesome. Did the talk here late last year, sitting in my office in Farmville, Virginia. Did a presentation to the Richmond, Virginia Azure group 6 hours later. Things had changed. Not making that up. Does it bother me? No, not really. It's kind of part of it, right? I mean, this is how things improve as it changes. The only constant in life is change. But if that kind of churn bothers you, then I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's been that way in software development for at least 45 years, I know, because I started in 1975. So it's just gotten faster, and it's on someone else's server, right, in the cloud. So there's this. And if this bugs you, I apologize. I really do. I don't want to bug you personally. You click on new token, it slides out this blade, create a new person access token. These expirations, you can set that to a custom date, I think for up to a year. And then you need to set a couple of properties. They're not all shown here, but you do need to configure those. Go to your organization settings, and now you configure an agent pool, which is going to use that agent. Now, when I first read that document I showed you from back in August, it was talking about you should use Azure pipelines, and so I did. I do everything Microsoft tells me. I'm not even going to finish that sentence, but I love Microsoft, love working with the people there. They're awesome people. They really are. But I did this Azure Pipelines thing, and it was taking like 12 minutes for it to run. I was like, that makes no sense. I was talking to some friends of mine in the industry who've done this kind of work, a couple customers actually, who had gotten way ahead of me in Azure DevOps, not unusual. And one in particular said, no, go do the local agent. You'll like it better. And you'll see it performs, it starts running in less than a few seconds, which wasn't happening when I did the Azure pipelines. Now, to be fair, I haven't tested Azure pipelines in, I don't know, a year. They may be running lickety split right now, and I'd be just this ignorant guy running his mouth in Farmville, Virginia. That happens a lot. So after you select these, and default is what I chose to use for local agents. I think I have to create or use a different or create a different agent pool to do that. After I've created or selected my default, it says, hey, use a new agent. Here, configure that. Once I clicked on that, if you kind of tuned me out a little bit, because some people say I have an accent. I don't believe it. I speak normally and everybody else speaks with an accent. However, come on back to me for just a minute, because this is super cool. It walks you through these steps. And first you click on the download the agent button, and then you pop open PowerShell and you just run these scripts here that you can copy. There's a little copy link right off to the side here, not showing in my screenshot. You just copy those and run them. And it just walks you through the entire rest of this process, including, you'll notice there's a file name here. That's the file name you downloaded. So yeah, awful lot of coolness right there. when you get to the configuration step, I did mine in PowerShell inside a command prompt, and I just did the /config command, and it said which URL do you want to connect to, Andy? Mine is dev.azure.com/entdna, which is short for the company Enterprise Data and Analytics. And so I did that, and then when I was done, I mean, there was a little bit to it here. I had my personal access token, and a note about those personal access tokens: when you create them, you want to copy them and store them somewhere securely. I use LastPass for a number of different things. It's not just for passwords and stuff. Not a commercial for that, but there's a bunch of security plugins for browsers that you can use for free, or for $20 a year or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy what you can get now in security, and pay attention to security. There's people out there that are not nice paying attention to security as well. But yes, you want to get that and store it somewhere immediately. Once you close that, it's gone. You have to create a new one if you want to use that, use a personal access token. So that's what it looked like, and it's just stepping through the defaults here, and that's what I did. And I'm not going to configure it, but I'm going to start it. And after you get it configured here, I'm going to start it. I think it's running right now. I'm going to have to stop it and start it. But that's my next demo. I'm going to pop over here now and do that. I've got, yep, I knew it. So I'm going to go ahead and try. I pressed Control-C, by the way, to stop it. But I'm in the C agent directory, and this is right where I wanted to be. And if I just type run, we're going to see that it's going to start listening for jobs. And if we were over on the portal for Dev Azure, dev.azure.com, if we were in there looking at the available agents, we would have seen that one turn off. And then when we started the job, it would have turned back on. So they're already in communication with each other, which I think is, like I said, it's just super cool. So we've kind of walked through the intro and a brief history in agents. Now we're going to get over to pipelines, and this is where the magic begins to happen. So late last year, the Azure SSIS team, they built a couple of new tasks, a build and a deploy SSIS task. And there were a lot of people that had versions of this out there that they had built. A lot of developers invested time and energy, and thank you. Kudos to y'all for doing all of that. I was getting my stuff done in PowerShell up to then, and I'm not Andy the PowerShell wizard, but I am working my way up to being a noob at PowerShell. I have a couple of friends who do really well at it. A person I communicate with a lot about PowerShell and SSIS is Aaron, and Aaron Nelson, SQL Variant on Twitter. And he's actually blogged about some of the interactions that we've worked together on with that. So they made it so, Microsoft built this themselves, so we can just configure a few properties, and we can build SSIS packages, and we can deploy them. Now, when I say that, what I'm really talking about is the agents, or any agents we have configured for this are going to do that. And when you construct a brand new pipeline, you start by clicking pipelines like we did here, and then clicking new, and then a new build pipeline. And this is, again, I'm going to use this to build, deploy, execute, do some test executions, and then run some tests on some results. That's the 4 things I'm going to do here. But it's really cool because these agents are really doing all the work. I had to pick, where's my code, and there's some more items in this list today if you do this. I had my code in Team Foundation, and that's what I did. I just mapped it right into there. I had to pick a source for my mappings, and that was also, I was after configuring this path here. So it was, I say that, I'm already in the SSIS samples path, but there, I needed to map the workspaces, and that's a TFS specific thing, workspaces. So just that's why I got the same question. It looked like the same question twice. It really wasn't. This empty job is what I went with rather than a template. I was out there earlier this morning goofing around, and creating a new team project. And they've got a bunch of templates out there now, a bunch more than they had the last time I was out there. I picked my default because that's my private agent. That's my local agent. It's going to be running on my VM. I've already got that configured as part of that default agent pool, if you remember. And one thing before I got started here is I clicked on variables and I created a new variable, pwd var. I could put my password in there and then mark that. There's a little lock. You click the lock. It's unlocked by default. You lock it. It's secure and it's encrypted by whatever they use up there at Azure DevOps. I trust it. We're going to be looking at the triggers as well here in just a bit. But under tasks, I just I added my agent name, and I clicked the plus bar here. I renamed the agent names. You'll see these as we go through the next couple demos. The agent name was here, and then I clicked plus, and when I did, it gave me access to a library or a gallery of tasks that are out there. I typed in SSIS for the search. I found build and deploy, and you can just click add for them. You can do it one at a time like I did here, or you can do them just, add the build, add the deploy. In build, I needed to configure this project path. That was the big thing I had to do here. And I just left the default name build SSIS there, but you can change that. Then again, going back, picking up deploy. And there's a lot more to the configuration of the deployment. And you'll notice here, like this $, begin paren build dot artifact staging directory in paren. That is a folder that shows up wherever your build agent is. So I'm pretty sure that maps to the underscore work folder in C:\agent running locally on my VM. Not positive of that, but that's where it starts because the build puts it there, right? And then I want to go into that folder and bring it back out so that I can deploy it. I'm going after the ISPack file, and for destination type, you can choose a catalog or I believe a file share, Azure file share. And I went to my destination server. This is an Azure SQL DB running a catalog, and my destination path is not the same as shown here. I actually built this for the PASS Summit last year in Seattle. I picked SQL Server Authentication username, and there's where I use that password variable. If I don't, it types it there in plain text, even today, which I think maybe they should use a password character there. Select my overwrite. And again, some of this has changed. This is different. It's a yes, no option or drop down. And then continue if deployment error occurs. No, stop. Pardon me. So I'm going to go ahead and execute the build. I'll pop back over here for just a minute, and we'll actually get to see this. So I'm going to minimize that for now. We'll come back to it in just a minute. But if I look at next my pipelines here, and I've got just a build and deploy. So let's take a look at what that, how that's configured, if I can click correctly here. There's that pipeline name. It's named 0-build and deploy. The agent is, as I just put the name of the agent in here, and then the name of the pipeline. And here's that configuration we were just talking about. So again, it's really straightforward. My target is that build.artifact staging directory. My source is this project path. And, and then once that's configured, I go to deploy, and this is where there's a little bit more here. And now, it's nice you can browse if you want to. I'm going to an SSIS DB, but file system is the other option if I want to go that way. And depending on where my agent is running, that could mean the local VM. It could mean a file share. That's the name SVA demo is my database. I've got a folder named DevOps test that I'm running to SQL Server Authentication, and that should not be there. That should be $pwd. I have to go look at that was disturbing. That's why it's not there. Oh, okay. Well, I'll change that password right after we go. I'm going to discard that change. But yeah, that PWD val should not be there. Dag nabbit. But anyway, if we go back through here, that's don't screenshot. That's not being recorded, is it? That's okay. That was a cool password, but it must die. So we're all ready to run now. And what I can do right from here, from the pipelines, if I click on build and deploy, I can run that pipeline from right here. You can see I've been doing that already. That's where some of the testing was going on. Well, once I do that, you can see it's running the job. There it is inside of running the job. And if I click on the link here, it's probably gotten through some of the steps here. That's walking through, checking out, and this takes a minute or so to actually do this. And it'll deploy this to a folder that's out there. So it's it's still walking through the build SSIS. And once that's done, I just remembered something I needed to do, but that's okay. We'll roll with this. We'll skip right over there. So it did that agent job. It looks like it succeeded. And if we go back to pipelines, we'll see if I refresh this, we should see that it succeeded, and it did. So pretty straightforward build there, but again, I had to go push the button to make it happen, and it wasn't really what I wanted to happen. So what I really want to happen is, as soon as I check in that code, I wanted to fire off that build and deploy, and it didn't do any testing at that point. I wanted to check it in, build, deploy, test it, and do all that on checking. So I add a test SSIS execution here and a test evaluation. I do both of these in Azure PowerShell. It's just one way to do it, and it's a way that I've learned enough to do this. So when I do an execution, I use an SSIS Framework Community Edition, and this is available out there for free, and it's open source. So I don't know what else I can do, but if you go to dilmsuite.com, there's a couple of things out there that I charge for, but most of the stuff out there is free, and about half the free stuff is open source. So you can have at it. And if you, the way I built it is if you right click and click execute in the SSIS catalog, you get this execute package dialog, and you can script it. And what it does is it builds this three-step process. So the first and the last step are just a call to a single stored procedure. The middle step can be multiple calls. So the first step is create the intent to execute. The middle step is configure that intent. That can take multiple calls. Finally, you just execute it. And you can see it right there. This is what the SSIS catalog generates. And I wanted the ability to be able to run an SSIS package from anywhere in my catalog. I didn't want it to have to add the package necessarily to every project. If it's something like archive file, which I need on every project maybe, but I don't really want to import that. And then because then if something happens, I found a bug, I add some functionality, I got to re-add it, retest everything, and then redeploy to production. That's my biggest problem with this. So if I put this wrapper around what we just saw, the catalog generate, and I created a custom schema inside of SSIS DB. 2 reasons I did that. Not going to say anything more about them. Not even going to tell you what the 2 reasons are. And here you see I create an intent to execute. And it's the exact same stored procedure that we saw in the previous slide. I just parameterized it. I passed in folder, project, and package because those are used to create the intent to execute. And that means I can call archive file from anywhere, just instead of using the execute package task to call another package in my project. I can call any package that lives in the SSIS catalog. Doesn't matter where. As long as I get the folder, project name, and package name, I can put archive file in there and just do that. So that's enough about that. That's when you see run SSIS package using the SSIS framework, pardon me, that's what it's doing. So, and again, free open source, dilmsuite.com. That's what we had before, was just to build and deploy. I added these 2 new ones, and they're Azure PowerShell. Pretty cool. And then I configured them. And the run calls what I call in my framework an SSIS application. It only has the one package in it, but I call that and it executes it. And then I run a test suite, which is I'm going to run a query against a target table, and I'm going to check for the number of rows in that table. And you can see at the second to the last line of the PowerShell there, it's looking for a record count value, and if it is not equal to 1, then I throw an error here. I write out an error in PowerShell. So in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do when we get to that next demo here, which I forgot to put a demo slide in. But in my in here, I got to configure this first just a little bit. That's what that next slide was about. So if I go to configure, I click on triggers, and I look at at the SSIS samples. If I enable continuous integration, that's it. Then when I check in, it's going to run this pipeline. And this pipeline is going to build and deploy and test. I want to do, actually, I just want to run this. I'm going to do it just like this. Excuse me. And let's pop over to my solution. And I can cause a failure. Remember I said if it's not equal to 1 record? There's actually 1 record out there right now. Oh, sorry, I take it back. Let me go look. I think there's 0. Yeah, there's 0 out there right now. So if I take out this truncate, I'm going to disable it and then do a check-in. So my comments tell you what kind of day I'm having. This is actually going to succeed when it runs. And the reason is there's 0 records in there. It's going to put 1 in there. You notice all I did was check in, and the job is running. So I'll call this a successful demo. And if we pop over and look at what the job's doing, let's go back to pipelines. Let's watch build and deploy. And let's look at this one. And then again, I started in 1975. I was 11 years old when I started with Motorola machine code, and seeing the equivalent of a text screen here in front of me, just it's like coming home. So I know folks that grew up with GUIs have you have your own experience with that, but a lot of people that are in this field today doing DevOps are multidisciplined or doing it with Linux, and I tell you, there's just a lot of support for you folks out there doing it. This takes a minute. It's a small-ish SSIS catalog database that's out there. It's I think 2 cores and 8 or 16 gigs. I want to say it's 8 gigs of RAM. So here we are coming up on 48 seconds. It looks like it's about to finish. And then it's going to execute the test, and the test will take a few seconds as well. We'll see the test succeed, but I'm going to do it again, and it's going to fail because there's going to be a second record in there. It's gone from 0 to 1 now. So we'll watch this. But this right here is enough. I checked the code in, and it fired off this pipeline. I fired this automated process that I've got, and that's one of the things that I've heard people say, and I like it, is they'll say, what we're selling here is automation. And while I get that, I'm an engineer down to the bone, all right? I get that, and I love automation for automation's sake as a result of that. But what we're really selling here is confidence. So I'm going to go do that again. I'm going to fake it. This time I'm going to disable and enable this guy out here. That triggers a change, and I'm going to say fails like it's supposed to. There. Can't spell. And I'm not going to try that apostrophe. It would work. I know it would work. All right, off we go. We're going to look at our agent first. We should see that vdemo agent 1 fire up here. There it goes. It started. Let's pop over here and we can talk through some more about what I mean about about confidence. So this is why you spend the time on automation. You beat through all of the stuff, right? I had issues today because of security, because all of my accounts had expired yesterday, and I had to go back and re-enter all my credentials and stuff, and it was hard. It took me an hour to get these demos back in running shape. But what is the confidence that we have? It's not so much for this version, this first version, but think about the subsequent versions that come back. Because again, these tests don't go anywhere, right? Whether you're building them like I am in Azure PowerShell in here, or you're using test plans that are another thing you can automate in here. And there's tools out there that support SSIS testing as well. And it's because there are billions of SSIS packages still executing every year. That's a fact. This one should fail, remember, because of that. What is the confidence? The confidence is when I put something into production, I'm going to know that it's supposed to work. Just like I wrote in my comment. I've got confidence that it's supposed to work. I'm going to catch a bunch of errors that I already caught back in the past sometime because I've taken some time to write some tests, whether they're manual tests in Azure PowerShell or whether I'm using some testing suite that's generating these tests for me. There's my 2 records showing up as the failure there. If we can zoom back over here and take a look, there's the record. So, and there's task insights in Azure DevOps is saying, hey, this thing has failed a lot. Maybe you want to do some work on it. It's fine. It's part of my demo. But thank you, Azure DevOps, for asking. But yeah, confidence. I want to see that all of this runs. So if we enable that CI on deploy to test, what I just did, and then I build a deploy to production pipeline, and then I can enable on that deploy to production pipeline, some more settings that will basically begin now to chain pipelines together. And to do that, I can do, you just saw me do the enable continuous integration on the first pipeline. But if I go to, to the next pipeline and click on triggers, I can add a build completion and I can set it up to point to that deploy to test. So we're going to do that next as we get in. So when I do, some little change, which isn't going to change anything in production, right? Anybody said that? Raise your hand. Yeah, me too. Does it ever work for you? It never works for me. So let's go look at how we would trigger that build. The next build in my line is number 2 because, I can count. And if I go to add it and zoom in here and look at triggers, here's one on build completion. So if I click add here and say, yep, when number 1 finishes, I want you to go. Of course, I got to save it and it's going to prompt me for a comment, which I'm not. I'm just skipping the comments in here. I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do. Back to the pipelines. Let's do a check-in. And this time we're going to change the code first. I'm actually going to enable this. And I'm going to say, should succeed and deploy to prod. So it should go all the way through. Those changes I just made should cause that to happen. So when I check it in and save it and I go look at my command, we should see the job run again. That failure was on purpose. Failing is important, by the way. Number of places I can go with that, but failing is a really good thing. You need to know how to do that. Let's go look at our pipelines, do a quick refresh of this page, and we see number 1 is running. And if we go look at the job at the agent, it's already into it. It's a good healthy kick inside of there. And by the way, I'm hearing I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I'm getting email because every time a job succeeds or fails, I get an email telling me the job succeeded or the job failed. So kind of cool. This test that we're doing here, which is going to give us confidence because it's a regression test. We expect this test to succeed unless something bad is happening. And believe it or not, just this morning, I was running this piece. I must have ran it, I don't know, a couple dozen times because it was one little thing after another. The agent uses Visual Studio on the VM. It's because it's a locally hosted agent. So I had to go in, and I've got two versions of Visual Studio, Community and Enterprise. I had to go into both, sign out, reboot, come into both, sign in. And before I could do all that, I had to figure that out. That took more time than the actual work, because it was telling me, and the error was actually telling me when it was trying to do, initially when it was trying to do the build, it's like, your credentials have expired. So successful test of credentials expiring, yeah, right before I was supposed to present. So there was a lot. There's a lot of moving parts along with this. This is not trivial, and it wasn't easy, and it wasn't easy this morning. But like everything in software, if it was easy, anybody could do it, right? So we're finishing that up, and it's all good. If we go back to pipelines now, we may catch the next one running. If not, we'll do an F5 here, see if 2's up. All right, I'm going to click on 2, be that way. And there it is, it's running. Pop into our job. And here we are running a second job. By the way, you can look at the command prompt. Number 1 succeeded. Number 2's running. Pardon me. And this is building, and it's deploying to my production folder. And in fact, it just finished that. And again, it's a catalog folder on a server there. And if I click, this is the framework piece. It's going to deploy some metadata, and then it's going to execute or attempt to execute this using the framework. And again, job 3 has started. There's 2 succeeded. Here we are at job 3. So it does a little cleaning first. There's stored procedures in here that it's calling. But again, I'm triggering them using Azure PowerShell for these particular jobs. And then it'll deploy some metadata, and then it'll execute. That's what those steps that have yet to execute, the ones under clean production metadata. Deploy production metadata. Yes?
We do have a question.
Okay, please.
This question is from Naveen. Can we have a step for an approval before deploy to production in this pipeline?
For approval, yes. In fact, all throughout there's steps you can inject steps for approval in here. I'm not going to be able to demo that for you in the time left, but the answer is yes. And it's part of that screen where I check it, enable continuous integration. You saw some other stuff appear. That's what that other stuff deals with, is allowing for approvals to take place. Absolutely, you can't do DevOps without approvals. Well, you can, but you may get yourself in trouble. If it's just you, yes, but if it's not just you, and even if it was just me, I'd try and find somebody somewhere to come in and approve these. And look. If I see the green checks, you don't have to know what they mean. You just have to believe that they work. Pardon me. So one of the things that I did here, one of the tests, part of the test is it deployed to production, and there is this is one of the free but not open source things available at the ILM Suite, SSIS catalog browser. And it's taken a minute to refresh here because I'm presenting, and the string between the two cans out here in Farmville isn't tight. But it did a deployment of this. This was where it actually sent this test SSIS project. So before I ran this the first time today, this folder was empty. And it actually did the deployment into this. This is a folder we've been deploying to over and over again as we went through this. All catalog browser allows me to do is, is manage things that you have to open a window or two inside of SSMS. SSMS is free. This is free. Use what makes you happy. I like this single surface approach, but I am really biased because I wrote it. So anyway, thanks for interrupting me with that question. That was a great question. We're done, and I want to point out that I teach courses. I do online training. There's some training coming up for free. If you've lost your job due to the pandemic, you go to andyleonard.blog/lost_job. There's a name and email form. Then I send you back a small novel about, how to go register for this process. But if you do that, you can take the training free. And I'm doing 3 days next week, stuff that I usually charge for. So Expert SSIS is next Monday and Tuesday. Master the fundamentals of the Azure Data Factory is Wednesday next week. The schedule slide is out of date, but totally free if you've been affected by the pandemic. I want to do anything I can to help, and this is one little thing that I can do that may help. You can learn more about me at my blog too, andyleonard.blog/learn-more, and this is my email address. I want to say thank you to the organizers of the Azure Data Fest. They were very kind to select my session. It's always an honor to present, and thank you.
Hey, thank you, Andy. That was a fantastic session. Really, this is one topic that is not well known and discussed. I keep wondering why there is no source control for SQL and all the SSIS that you shared with us. This is extremely valuable. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Just not trying to fuss at you, but there's some tools out there that do SQL Server source control. It's not native, but more and more they are adding support for this. In in Azure Data Studio, you've got a source control button built right in. It's the lower left corner there. There's that. Not a lot of free tools out there that are available, and I think the reason. The reason why it's not out there as much as it is because this is hard. Those tools were built for stateless things like Node and web pages and what have you, JavaScript. All of that's stateless, and data by its very nature is stateful.
Yeah.
So what happens if we add a new column and we put it in, deploy it to production, and we capture data and it's time to roll back for some reason. What do we do with the data in that column? What do we do if it's GDPR? Data, it gets crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, but great point.
Thanks
yes,
everyone
sir.
for attending this session, and I'll stop the recording now and prepare for the next speaker.